Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie Agatz with another edition of our podcast series. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Nabeel Mahmood here with us. And he is a technologist, a futurist, a board member, and a keynote speaker. And he really does a lot of consulting around the CX suite, which would be, CIOs, CEOs, CTOs, and the like. And we really appreciate your time. So tell us a little about yourself and how you got into tech and what you enjoy about tech.
Well, Kerry, thank you for having me. It's been an interesting journey to get into the tech space. Growing up, I was an athlete, and here we are after 20 years, a total cycle of events. Anyhow, long of the short is that I was potentially at the right place at the right time, heard a few guys talking about technology, and became a part of that conversation, and that basically drove my career. I started my career, early part of my career was in the software industry. So defining where we're at today as it entails to services, ERP, MRP, and just big data and data capturing when nobody was really talking about it. And then moved around a little bit, got involved in designing built-in data centers, and did a spell most recently as a CIO of a company in California, whereby I had an opportunity for implementing everything that I've been talking about early part of my career, and got to see some of the fruits and the results of it. So where I'm at in my career right now, there's been a chain of events that has resulted into me changing and being on the end user side, as they call it in the space, to being more on the consultative side, whereby I have an opportunity now to share my experiences with the world and help people get better in what they're doing and what the future of technology should be like.
Talk to me a little bit about this futurist role. A lot of the listeners that we have sort of feel like you have to write code to be in tech, which we have a lot of episodes that talk about why that's not true. But understanding sort of the futurist role and where things are going, if you could pick, A, tell us, what you mean by futurist, and then B, maybe share with us a couple ideas of where you think some cool, interesting new places for tech to go would be.
So the futurist role is to have the ability to look forward. Unfortunately, where we're at in the space that we play in, and that is not just IT or data centers for that matter, that applies in human life, we end up being very siloed. We end up developing a tunnel vision. We sort of start living in the moment. The futurist role is to have a strong base of where we're at and start looking forward. Step away, step back, and look at the bigger picture, look at the canvas, and draw the Picasso. I mean, that's really, in my point of view, the role of the futurist is to have a bigger, broader picture and, helping grow on the basics and the foundation that we've actually developed thus far. Where is the future headed? Well, COVID-19 is a perfect example of it. If it wasn't for 5G, or if it wasn't for communication, if it wasn't for connectivity, this would be the most insane time. So, folks that had thought through about connectivity, thought through about internet, thought through about communication, thought through about these applications that are available and accessible at our fingertips, is the reason we've got the sanity in our lives right now. Otherwise, it will be bananas. If we did not have that human interaction that we were able to maintain and create in some way, form, or shape through a virtual movement that we are in, we would be in very difficult times right now. So the role of the futurist really is, in a lot of ways, to develop and grow on the basics, on the foundation that we already have in place. So where are we headed? That's always a very interesting question. The way I like to answer that is that this is just the beginning of time. We haven't even, broken the ice yet. So the future is really virtual. The future is connectivity. The future is information at your fingertips. So whether it be currencies, converting from fiat currencies to digital currencies to cryptocurrencies, that's the future. Autonomous vehicle, autonomous driving, autonomous experiences, that's the future. Faster connectivity and connecting points, that's the future.
You bring up a good point about cryptocurrency, and we actually haven't covered that on this podcast at all. So tell everybody what that means and how that lays out for the average. Like if I was a small business owner, how would cryptocurrency come into play for me?
So, The simplest form of introducing cryptocurrency or defining cryptocurrencies, we've already been using it for the last couple of decades. That's credit card transactions. So you are already accustomed to it in some way, form, or shape. We have moved from the fiat currency, whereby we used to carry paper money or coins for that matter in the past, to now doing a lot of these transactions on credit cards. The future, however, is going to be a little bit different as it entails to the valuation of the money. Now, with crypto, it's going to expose what the real valuation of the currency is. So if you step back in time just for a minute, we had standards such as tobacco, gold, and others in the past that defined the valuation of the currency. Now it's going to be based on assets. It's going to be based on GDP. There's a lot of more metrics that are going to come in place to define the valuation of the currency. What does it mean to all of us? That is going to be basically that money is going to be available. Interest rates are going to be lower because of the availability of information and accessibility to those monies that are available in VC, private equity, banking in general. So crypto, again, it doesn't really change the equation at all. Money is money is money. It's just going to change the way we handle money. So instead of carrying cash or bartering back in the day, I'll trade you a cow for some grains sort of a thing, to now, making it all digital and accessible at your fingertips. So you're using a mobile device to trade, you're using your mobile device to make a payment.
Awesome. Let's talk about, because you and I are both consultants, so let's talk about the steps to starting a project, working with a project. What exactly does a consultant bring to the table, and what that process looks like for you?
Yeah, so typically the way I actually get engaged in any consultative engagements for that matter is to understand what the ultimate goal is. What do you want to really accomplish? And how much of a buy-in am I going to have? So you might come across all these buzzwords, such as, we want to be edge ready. We want to move our infrastructure into cloud. We want to have a digital transformation strategy, so on and so forth. At the end of the day, it could be all very complex if you don't have the buy-in, if you don't have the long-term vision, and what does that really mean to your business? So my process typically starts with the end goal in mind and then reverse engineer it. So if somebody's talking about digital transformation, okay, what does that encompass? Okay, what is included as an ultimate goal? Where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? I'm not talking 10 years. I mean, these are short-term goals, 3 to 5 years at the most. So some of the good examples would be is that, digital transformation, for instance, with a manufacturing company that I actually did some consulting work for, well, they wanted to be able to see everything and anything that happens in the manufacturing environment. So that meant that we were going to upgrade their ERP system from the old green screen to something that's more intuitive, whereby we can actually have APIs in place and capture real-time information from all the machines that were in place. That also meant that we are going to integrate that with human capital and human capital utilization. So there's a lot of things, that come into play. It's not that, we're going to fix one thing and everything else is going to fix by itself. It's kind of like playing chess in a lot of ways, that you need to know what your next 10 to 12 moves are. So with a digital transformation goal in this particular scenario, the idea was we want to increase productivity. We need to increase efficiencies. So things that they were not thinking through or about, for instance, would be human capital and human capital utilization. Things that they weren't thinking about was downtime, and things that they weren't thinking about is machine learning or robotic process automation. So what we did in this particular event was that we started looking at every single process in the food chain, and then started defining the processes that would improve efficiencies. For an example, if you are actually looking at a manufacturing process and there were 7 physical human steps that needed to be taken, can we consolidate that to 1 or 2 without any negative disruption to the system? So you've got to go through every single process in the chain and make sure that it's workable and it's not repetitive.
Yeah, and I think, you touched on a really good point, that buy-in is a big thing. I can say from experience that sometimes the CEO has a vision that nobody else shares. And every IT person that I've ever talked to wishes that their CEO would throw away all editions of PC Magazine because, these buzzwords become goals without people understanding A, how to get there, B, what those real ramifications are. And we've gone from data being sort of something that's a nice to have in a company to an absolute essential. So there are no companies that could function without their data, and trying to make that accessible and usable to the masses is a process.
Absolutely. And I think, not that I'm trying to sell anything to anyone over here, but the fact of the matter is that there's a communication gap. The CEO, the CIO, the CTO, they are on a different playing field altogether. They might all synchronize with the bigger, broader vision. However, they're unable to communicate typically downstream to the functional organization. So whether it be sales, manufacturing, whether it be facilities, IT, anything for that matter, that vision does not translate down to the reality of how people are at the coding level, how people are at the trenches, right? So that communication is another thing that I really focus on to make sure that it can be translated back and forth between all the silos that we have in our businesses.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that everything is a tool in the toolkit. But, you take a company that says, oh, we're transitioning everything to cloud. We're cloud first. We are, that's the only way that we're going. And you say, well, what's really the goal there? And then you find out that the goal is that they want to cut costs. Well, in some cases with existing infrastructure and capital expenses that aren't depreciated and better means and better ways to compute in some of the on-site stuff, maybe it's a transition to cloud over a 5-year period, but you don't just draw a line in the sand and say, oh, that's it, we're going, and then expect everybody to follow along, because people hate change.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think another part of it is like, cloud is not necessarily the answer. What's the driving factor behind that? I mean, you probably might be, again, that goes to digging into your closet. You probably might be better just staying on-prem for that matter. You don't know. As long as, the executives are doing the talk because of the hype that the market creates. It's nice, it's good, it's sexy to move everything into cloud. It's going to be cost effective, but that's not necessarily always true.
Well, sexy and efficient don't always come in the same package, for sure. But I think it is important, and I would encourage CIOs, CEOs, CXOs, whatever that technology drive is, to really get a full understanding of what the outcome is supposed to be. So, like, for instance, if a company is writing a request for information, you're going to get back all kinds of crazy stuff if you don't have a legit problem that you're trying to solve. And that's really, I think, what you have to start is, this is what I need. This is what I expect. Now, this is how to get that. And it may be a combination of all these buzzwords. It might be some edge. It might be some cloud. It might be some on-premise. It might be, different places for that data to be located. But I think really making sure that you understand that, and you can't do that in a vacuum. And I'm sure you do the same thing, where you interview super users in each department, you interview the not so great users in each department, and you really look and pick apart the process to figure out where economies could be had and where savings could be had, and then figuring out the financial implications on the backside.
Absolutely. It's a very logical process. I mean, you've got to, look under the hood, look at everything possible, and be open-minded. I mean, any engagement that I'm involved in, I don't have an agenda. Whatever makes business sense, whatever makes technical sense, is the route to go.
Yeah. And so for those of you that are listening that may not get some of these terms or understand what some of this is, they're all different ways and means to have data, and where you store that data and where you process that data. And like you said, a lot of these buzzwords pop up in the industry and they sound cool, but they're big things that, it's a word that ends up being all encompassing. And I will say this, especially over the last 15 years, it's worse than it was probably in the first part of my career, but these buzzwords tend to be all encompassing of stuff that they were never really intended to be anyway.
Yeah, I think marketing in a lot of ways actually overtaking the market, right? For instance, I was actually having a conversation about the cloud the other day. It's like, hey, have you heard about the empowered cloud or the distributed cloud? I'm like, guys, come on, you got to step back. I will oversimplify cloud over here for you. It's every decade we go through this cycle. It's distributed computing versus centralized computing. That's as
That's it.
simple as it can get. So to cloud or not to cloud is not the question, or the empowered cloud, or the distributed cloud. That's all irrelevant. You've got to figure out if it's distributed architecture or is it centralized. Whatever is functional for your business needs, whatever gives you that availability, uptime, and resiliency is or should be the point of discussion, not to cloud or to cloud.
Absolutely. And what works for one company, doesn't necessarily work for another company at all, because they're at different spots in their company life cycle. They're at different spots with where they are with their customer base, different spots with where they are with their end users. And each one needs to be really individually evaluated. And you get people that are very hot on a technology and they're great evangelists for it. And there's some technologies, I evangelize, but to be fair, they're not right for everybody.
Absolutely. Now, it's kind of interesting. In November, I spoke at a conference in San Francisco, and we were talking about artificial intelligence and the play of artificial intelligence data center. And one of the gentlemen that was actually on the panel with me said, Nabeel, I will never use AI in my data center. Like, that's outstanding. So let's step back in time. I'm like, hey, do you use a calculator? He's like, yeah, all the time. I guess what that is. That is AI. A lot of the challenges that we've created in the industry is like you said, Carrie, we have generalized a lot of these terminologies and buzzwords whereby, people get very emotional. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that because it's going to take away my job, or it's going to, take away all the control I have in my space. And I'm very territorial. So, that's really what our job is in a lot of ways, is simplify and make sure that people are able to understand what all of these buzzwords and technologies really mean.
And like I said, they each have their place for sure. And this is a cyclical industry. I've been in this industry. Anybody listening knows I'm no spring chicken, but you do go centralized, decentralized, back to centralized. I mean, because there's different use cases and compute changes. And I will say that AI is definitely one of those subjects that I think terrifies people because, for a few reasons. One, like you said, people are worried about losing their job. But realistically, at the end of the day, if you're in tech, part of your job is to be a strategic thinker. And if that takes some stuff off your plate and gives you more of a chance to do that, then yay, all the better. But I think one of the scary things about AI, and there's been multiple studies on this, is how AI carries the bias of the person doing the programming. And so when we talk about diversity in tech, I think that's one area where it gets really scary for a lot of people because, we don't all want machines to think the same. There's no diversity in thought, and there's a lot to be said for diversity. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Well, I think to oversimplify this, robots are never going to take over the human intelligence. So
let's hope.
Yeah.
Although I have known a human or two that probably could have been improved by that, but
so here, the way I look at it, and being a futurist for that matter, robots think binary. It's ones and zeros for them. It's a yes or a no. There's no maybe. So there's no emotional part to the robot making a decision. They will always, the human intelligence and the emotional intelligence are always they always overrule the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a means of calculations. In my point of view, we should not be afraid of it. Again, you asked a great question early. Hey, how did you get into space, or why did you get into space? I wouldn't say I was necessarily lazy, but I'm of the belief if there is a better way of doing something and a task that is repetitive, find an easier way of doing it. And AI, in my point of view, the way I look at it is that better, easy way of doing that repetitive task.
Yeah, there's this program called OpsRamp that does a lot of the artificial intelligence inside a data center. And I was sitting through one of their presentations, and they had a customer, and AI was able to take 10,000 a month help desk request and drop it down to about 3,000 or maybe even lower, because it learned simple things like this server needs to be rebooted. That's a good solution for a lot of things, or those same repetitive tasks that you're talking about. And think about the poor guy that's running around. I mean, nobody in IT really works 40-hour-a-week job anyway,
Yeah,
or at least nobody that I know. And to be able to pull some of that off your plate and free you up for thinking about and evaluating different technologies. I think a lot of people in tech have really just gotten to the point that they rely so much on the vendors that they have because it's the path of least resistance. And it's the easiest just to swallow whatever they're shoving down your throat today, that, they miss a lot of the big pictures. I'm doing a bunch of work right now with smart cities. And I just got off the phone with a guy and said, so do you think a smart city is a smart light pole and a smart trash can? Because if you do, I'm like, no. That's an application that goes into a smart city, but thank God. Okay, well, we can talk now because he said that's what most people think, and there's so much more to that. Like every time I do one of these interviews, I learn about this amazing technology that's coming up, and they've actually, this one particular gentleman, Doug Young in Lincoln, Nebraska, they've teamed up with the university there. They've got everything that they do is a partnership, so it's city first, but like, for instance, if somebody pulls fiber, they make them pull extra fiber. The city pays for their piece and they get extra fiber. And then they have all of these different applications that they're trying, and they're not scared to just step in and try. And that's where genuine innovation comes from. And if we don't give ourselves time to do that, then we're not going anywhere.
absolutely. Yeah, the only thing that I would add to it, and to your earlier point about robots taking over, I believe as a futurist or as somebody that's always thinking forward, what's imperative is that we keep humility and humanity in mind, whereby how is it going to benefit us and how are we going to make our experience on Earth beneficial and fun versus the evil part of it, like it's going to take the world. Like, a lot of the science fiction movies present this dark, horrifying future. That's not the truth. That's not reality. If only we keep, us as mankind and humans in mind and use it for the betterment of the mankind.
Yeah, that's really a brilliant way to think about it. And I think in tech as a whole, we talk about diversity of people, diversity of thought, different solutions that can come to the table. And I think that plays in all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about your journey a little bit, and not just how you got into the role you got, but let's talk about the diversity and side of things and sort of obstacle that you've overcome and successes and people that lifted you up. And let's talk about the positive side of that.
Yeah. So, I was a mathematics major and I figured I had my life all calculated. I had spreadsheets, more spreadsheets than one can think of about my future, my retirement plan, so on and so forth, but nothing really worked the way I thought it would. So it's been peaks and valleys throughout my entire career. However, I've been able to put myself in a position where I've actually really started to appreciate my life and the journey. A lot of good things have come out of it by meeting right people and finding a few good mentors along the way as well. I got stuck in corporate America in the rat race, and I flatlined about 4 years ago. I had two heart attacks. I was dead for 4 minutes and 19 seconds, and that was it. That's when I decided to actually get into the consulting part of the business and being a mentor to the younger generation and sharing my experiences and totally changing my perspective on life for that matter. So met a lot of great people. Mark Thiele, for instance, is a great example. Mark has been absolutely phenomenal, a great mentor. Phil, that I believe you know as well,
Yep.
good friend. So, learning from those people and making sure that I can actually step back and evaluate myself about my life and be a self-critic. So uh, it's certainly been a very interesting journey and finding good
I'm,
friends.
I'm probably my own worst critic.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned is that you've got to start to love yourself. Unfortunately, we end up losing our voice as we come out of college or we start a job. We end up losing that voice. I reckon when I was younger that I had a voice. I could think about something and go do it and not be afraid about it. When I started my corporate career, I started losing that voice and I got in the line with millions of other people, right? And It was about keeping up with the Joneses. It was about a lifestyle that wasn't really for me. And it took a while to sort it out and figure out what was really important in my life. And what's important in my life is to be a change agent, to help other people. And, at the end of the day, I believe that if I can help one person in my life, whatever that lifespan ends up being, that I've actually helped the world, I'll help the universe.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, that's the whole point of this here is, this whole podcast series is really just to bring news of different careers and different possibilities to people. And to say that too, that, there's a lot of paths into these careers that don't necessarily all start and end with a college degree. And, I think skills-based learning is something that's going to come out of this COVID is people are figuring out ways that, they just need to make money while they've been laid off or something else, but you do bring up a great point about mentors. And if you've ever had a mentor, it's great to become one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, we started a project a few months ago. It's called Nomad Futurist. Again, the nomad of my lifestyle now, and the futurism carries on. It's about encouraging younger people to find their future and to think differently. We don't have to do the same thing that our fathers and grandfathers and great grandfathers did, or the generations prior to us did. We've got to learn from now. The future is now, is the way I actually would state it. And life is moving too quick. And there is a lot of good information available out there. There's a lot of good content available out there. And we should be able to learn a lot quicker versus how it was done in previous generations.
And I think too, some of the alternative education methods, certifications, learning on your own. Like one of my mentees right now is trying to learn Python. And I said, if you're trying to learn a new language, the smart thing to do is come up with some really cool problem that you could solve and say, okay, well, I'm going to write a program to do this. And then figure out all the, everything that you need to do to make that happen, make it work, and then write the program. And then next thing you know, you've learned a language. There's alternate paths to a lot of things because she's in a job she hates right now. She's not challenged. She doesn't feel that kick. And I will say this too, I think from a corporate America, and you sort of touched on this earlier, is this fear culture. Once you get in and you start working for somebody else, and a lot of companies really have that culture of fear. You're scared to try anything because if this goes down for 5 minutes, I'm going to lose my job. Or if this happens, I'm going to lose my job. And I think it stifles so much innovation, just that entire culture of fear.
So people are afraid of asking for a promotion because they might end up losing their job.
My take on being a boss has always been that if you give people the tools and support they need and a challenge, they'll surprise you every time. But you have to have that. You can't have that culture of fear. You have to be able to support them, help them out, teach them a little bit along the way, and just, hey, grow your wings, fly.
Exactly.
And be happy when somebody leaves you. If they're leaving you for a better opportunity, they're bettering themselves. Let them go. But culture, I would say, is a lot of it. Most people that leave a job, I don't think leave a job strictly for money. Because if you're happy in your job, you're not looking.
Absolutely. Well, again, that's like a generational gap we had, whereby in the past, the idea was that you start with one company and that's the company you're going to end your career with. Secondly, that particular style also dictated that management used to look at efficiency by the number of bums in the seat and how big the corporate office is. That's totally changed. I mean, now we're living in a culture where work from home is the normal. And I think it's already old. Work from anywhere is the future normal. And the metrics have changed whereby now you're looking at efficiency of that individual. So it doesn't really matter if you work 40 hours or you work 20 hours, as long as you can deliver what you promised and a quality product, you can choose a healthy lifestyle. So in the last 10 to 15 years, I believe we have actually had this hockey stick effect that people have started to realize that what we've been doing for the last 40, 50 years is not right. I mean, we haven't even changed our education system in the US since the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. And, that's come up several times too, that if you really expect to hire a diverse workforce, you can't only hire college grads because they've all learned the exact same way, the exact same lessons and curriculum. And technology has outpaced what you learn in college by leaps and bounds, and curriculum is a very, very slow moving machine anyway. And a lot of kids get out of school and then they've got to turn around and now go get certified. But then you look at the electrician program, right? Take a guy and put him as an electrician's apprentice. He gets done. He's got a job making $100,000 a year with zero debt. And I think that degrees are absolutely important for some jobs, and I think they'll never go away for some jobs, engineering, medical, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of other jobs that there's alternate ways to learn that. And I think that just absolutely brings a diversity of thought because people haven't learned the same exact way, right? Like, you're going to take out the trash. You have to have a trash bag in there. You pick it up, you shake it out, tie it up, walk it out to the trash can. There's no innovation there. But what if somebody could figure out a different way to take out the trash that was more efficient? Well, if you've taught everybody to do it that way, nobody's going to try something different.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's time for a change. It's kind of interesting. You asked about my journey earlier. Again, a mathematics major. As a matter of fact, I took a C++ class and it was so bloody boring in school. And I'm like, golly, I'm never going to do this. And here I'm at in the tech space. My learning experience really was multifold. One is the fact the education that I received gave me an opportunity to think outside the box and not be confined, because solving a mathematical equation, there's multiple ways of solving this, the problem.
Sure.
And it broadened my outlook and, how to simplify the process as well. I mean, do I need to follow every single bloody step to solve this equation, or can I actually simplify that? Not necessarily skipping steps, but it's a repetitive process in a lot of ways when you're solving complex equations. So how can I make it easier? So having that exposure at an early age and being an athlete and having the mindset of actually working together as a team versus doing things alone helped me throughout my career. You create teams in technology, you have group conversations, you work together, whereby you identify a problem and you're actually all solving and working on the same goal and helping each other out. My dad used to tell me it's like two heads are better than one sort of a thing, and then learning on the job. I mean, I've learned multiple languages from software perspective. And it was just all the mediums were available, and that want to learn was also, I wanted to make sure that the developers that I work with are, of course, smarter than me, but then I don't lose everything that they say in translation. So it kind of like, when you take a car to the mechanic, you probably just went in for an oil change. You don't want to walk out with a new engine, sort of a feeling. And I just self-taught myself with all the resources and mediums that are available and accessible. And I believe that's really the future of education and learning.
Well, I think so too. MOOCs, I think, started that whole wave. But, to your point, your background is sports and math, which is not traditional IT education at all. So just by way of you being differently educated, you bring a diversity of thought to any equation, right? So, I think having all of those different learning experiences is important, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what this remote work does to teams, because there's some people that are not going to work well remotely. There's some people that need that interaction and really need that face-to-face time because we're all different. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how we come out of this and what that difference is going to look like for folks. And I'll say, I think people are already getting, in some cases, tired of it. I've had a few conversations where I've offered to set up a video chat. And can we please just not? Can we please not? Because, people get Zoom fatigue. There's a whole new term surrounding that right now. So I think it's going to be really interesting how companies embrace this. Although I will say, I think that it's an amazing equalizer for caregivers that have had a hard time in tech because they haven't been able to work remotely when they've needed to. I think that definitely is going to change, and people are going to expect that remote, work from anywhere experience you talked about.
Yeah, so there's a few things we've got to keep in mind. I mean, nothing that we do is just going to override and overtake it. There's got to be some sort of a normality. We still need that human interaction. Hey, you know what? I do not mind living in Hawaii. Okay, but there's no tech in Hawaii. So I like to be alone. So it gives me the opportunity to think ahead and kind of like just play around with ideas. But I'm a social butterfly. I like mingling with people. I like that, personal interaction, the human interaction. So you've got to have a balance in your life. And, when I say work from home, work from anywhere, I mean, there's got to be a sense of balance as we move forward. That's going to be defined really by corporate leadership. That's also going to be defined by people. There are some people that actually just love or would love the opportunity to work from home, and they'll probably produce great results. Others are going to need or want to be in an office space. So organizationally speaking, that's a change management process that's going to be coming after as we get out of COVID-19 to create that perfect balance for the future success of any company.
Yeah, that's going to be so critical. I think that there's a lot of lessons learned. I mean, to be fair, nobody really could predict a global pandemic and what that's done business-wise. And a lot of people scrambled to ramp things up for this. And I think at the end of this, we're going to see a lot more people or companies reevaluating their technology decisions, reevaluating vendors. Just because somebody stepped up and got a whole bunch of your workforce remote doesn't mean that that's going to be your long-term solution either. So I think there's going to be a lot of inquiries at the end, and it's a good time to triage what happened and turn that into something strategic and meaningful.
Yeah, we've got to start thinking forward. There's a lot of good things that are going to come out of it. One being is that as far as the efficiencies within the organizations are concerned, executive management has finally started to realize the fact that the cream of the crop is going to rise and the ones that have been working the system are going to fall out. So they're going to start developing more and more metrics. They're going to actually have potentially better job descriptions, instead of the vague job descriptions that they have had in the past. So human resources is going to change. They're going to hold people more accountable to metrics and performance versus the emotional element that's actually resided in the past. And probably the HR function might get a little bit more technical to get to know really what the job functions are.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there. I was talking to a guy not long ago that was up for a job, and HR, very much ticked the box because this HR person was not at all technical. And he had experience with 3 CRM packages, but none of them were Oracle. And she refused to let him through because he couldn't tick the Oracle box.
Yeah, which doesn't really make any sense.
Right. So, yeah, well, you and I know that, but I do think that HR, whether they hire a technical consultant or we go back to using some of the technical recruiters that actually get the technology and can pass somebody forward for a job, I think that's going to change. There's been a lot of studies in the past that talk about how much more productive people are working from home, at least the ones that can do that. I've worked remotely for 20 some odd years. So I've definitely done that for a very long time, but you don't have the commute time. That commute time generally turns into work time. And if your laptop's sitting there and you're watching TV and a thought hits you, you'll run, write it down and things like that you wouldn't do in a regular office space. But in a lot of these big cities, the commute is huge and the impacts on the environment are amazing. Mm-hmm. I saw the canals in Italy and how clean they were and the wildlife and the lack of smog in LA. And people have just sort of been able to sit back and once everything got ramped up so people could work from home and just be able to take a deep breath, which is, like you said earlier, I think self-care is absolutely as important as financial care and job care. And I think people are going to expect a different work experience.
Absolutely. And with the current generation, so, generations prior to us, it was kind of like a norm of commuting, and like LA or San Francisco or New York City, an hour to 2 each way is perfectly acceptable. It has been in the past. we've actually been very, very harsh on millennials. And I apologize for that personally. I believe they were much smarter. They were way ahead of their time, and they had it right. I mean, the shared economy, the fact that, hey, I want to be able to work from home. I want to travel and experience the world. I want to live my life. To, the generation prior, we've got to work. We got to work. We got to work 9 to 5. Okay. That's like going to jail every day. So
yeah, that was kind of beat into my head since I was little. I think I had my first job at 12. So
yeah, and then you got to keep this job for forever till you retire, and it's a norm carry to go to work every day from 9 to 5. I mean, that's literally like checking into prison every day.
Yeah, no, I will say when I started in the tech side of things, that if you worked someplace more than about 3 years, people wanted to know what was wrong with you. Because you were worth so much more, you had better experience. And I will say, I think that's something else that's probably going to change out of this too, is the way we do raises. A 3% raise from the year before is not even cost of living. And I understand that companies need to take care of the bottom line, but what happens is you're training people to leave, and the cost when somebody leaves is extremely expensive. And like I said, if somebody's happy in their job, they're not looking anyway. But now they say with the Gen X and Gen Zers that 18 months is average to work on a job before they're looking to go somewhere else, which is, from a company perspective, we have to sit back and say, look, there's got to be a better way, because it's $100,000 to train somebody new when somebody walks out the door. And if it's in sales, it's a couple years before you gain that territory back.
Absolutely. So why would anybody want to leave the job, right? I think that's unfortunately the culture that we've created within the Americas is we're not loyal. The employers are not loyal to the employees. The employees aren't loyal to employers. And we're all money driven. It's very monetary. And I believe it's time for the change. I mean, you look at Europe, okay, let's just pick up Italy, right? Not the best economy in the world, but at least they have a commitment to their people. They work together, right? They have a lifestyle, and that's really what's important to all of them. I'm not saying that we need, 3 months of vacation a year, but let's be practical.
That'd be nice.
or 3 months of vacation and 4-day work week. Okay, let's be practical. I mean, we work all the time, but let's give people the opportunity to work and let it be fun. Let them live their life and let work be fun, something that they're passionate about. So a personal example over here, right? So when I was at this company in California, where I checked in every morning for 5.5, 6 years time frame, I worked maybe 60 hours a week, and I was toasted by the time I got back home. Now, I'm actually working more. I'm probably working 70, 80 hours a week, including travel, so on and so forth. But it is so much fun. I absolutely love it. And it doesn't feel like work. I mean, having this conversation is phenomenal. I have been Zooming all day long, and it is absolutely phenomenal. It's a lot of fun. I can't wait for the next conversation, because you're having these intellectual conversations with people that you enjoy, and you're learning, you're sharing your thoughts, you're learning about them, you're sharing your experiences, vice versa. And that's really what makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, and AI will never replace that, to your point. And I will say this, I say it would be fun to have 3 months of vacation. I would feel guilty just because, like you said, generationally, that's the way we were raised. And most companies, when I was coming up, would pay you out of your vacation, so you didn't take it. And it was, especially as you climb the corporate ladder, it was very much discouraged that you take that time off. And everybody I know around the globe, I mean, I have extended family literally all over the globe. They go for 2 or 3 weeks, don't answer their phone. I've never had a 2-week vacation, but I wouldn't know how to act. And I'm going to say I was 45 probably before I had a solid week off. And it was life-changing.
Yeah, and then you probably had a guilt trip for the entire week.
Well, I did for the first couple of days. And then it was like, man, I've been doing this wrong for a very long time. So yeah, I do think that the more creative companies definitely breed more loyal employees, because they give them a chance to just really enjoy their life. And that's such a huge part of it. You should work to live, not live to work.
Yeah, I call it the life and work balance. Unfortunately, in America, we've got it wrong. The whole HR has been around. It's gotta be the work and life balance, guys. Life comes first. If we if we can't live, we can't work.
There you go. There you go. Well, we're running up close to about the end of our time, and I absolutely appreciate your time today. But if you were going to leave some folks that are up and coming some words of wisdom to as parting words, what would you tell them?
Be nimble, be flexible. You know, follow your dreams, follow your passion, and don't be afraid of taking risks. My dad used to tell me one thing, and it actually did take me a while to figure that out and apply it personally in my life. If you don't risk anything, you risk everything in your life. So be flexible and follow your passion.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because if you really love what you do, it's not a job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will have a link to Nabeel's LinkedIn profile, and also to his company if you want to go read some of his Futurist stuff. He's got a really great webpage. And I'm sure that he would encourage you to reach out and connect, just like I would. And hopefully you guys have learned something. So thank you again for your time. And for the rest of you, we look forward to hosting you on another edition of this podcast series.
Gary, thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the conversation.
I did too. Thank you.